it's so silly. Or going and getting a couple beers and going in the woods and sitting there drinking like we're big people, you know? I mean, stupid stuff like that. I just like to have fun. Hi, I'm Wanda Rust, and I'm 69 years old. I live in Smyrna, Tennessee, and have been out here now almost 15 years, I think it is. I was born May 30th, 1953 in Malone, New York. My mom was Rita Rock. Her married name was Rena Greedo. So my dad, he was Earl Greeno, and we had altogether 8 children. I have 5 sisters and 3 brothers, and they go like this. They go like Becky, who's the oldest, and then it goes Erlene, Jerry, Mary, Dale, and then it goes myself, Wanda, and then it goes Karen, and then it goes John. There were 5 that were hearing impaired, actually, and 3 were not. And I'm right in the middle. I remember that the older ones were like mothers and fathers, and the 4 older ones took care of the 4 younger ones, and it was absolutely lovely. It was so much fun. We did more sports outside, family sports, you know, baseball, kickball, you name it, camping, that kind of stuff, the old-fashioned stuff. Actually, I was a tomboy. I liked my baseball bat and mitt. And when I was younger, of course, the dolls. And Karen and I had a favorite doll we used to always carry around and play with. My brother Dale, it seems like the boys always had the snow sleds and things like that. And I will tell you that one time my brother said, okay, I've showed you enough times, I'll let you drive the Skidoo. At that time it was a Skidoo. And so it was my first time driving. And unfortunately I came around the corner and I saw my girlfriend and I was like, hey, how you doing, you know? And I wasn't paying attention, so when I went to put my foot back down, I put it on the gas instead of the brakes and went straight through the garage, through the wall. My brother Dale never let me touch that, Skidoo for 1 year. He marked it on the calendar and said, you won't drive it again for a year. I loved music, and my mom got me, when I was 16 years old, a guitar, which I loved. And my cousin, Patty, to help me to learn to play it. And so I like to sing. Oh, singing, love to sing. Before even the guitar, I used to go to choir with my sister, and we lived in Burke, New York, and we'd both walk over to choir practice. And Christmas Eve was my favorite one time. Her and I went over and we sang everything was dark in the church, everybody had candles, and her and I got to get up and with the choir up in the balcony and sing, and it was absolutely beautiful. Music, anything with music. I mean, I'd go to sleep at night with radio and until the battery died, you know, that kind of stuff, and just loved all that kind of stuff. My mom was real, and my dad were quite strict. My father was stricter than my mother. My mother was to me, she was a saint. Every night before we went to bed, she always gave us a hug and kiss and told us she loved us. And that was every night, all 8 of us. And from the time I could remember, she did that to all of us. My father, he didn't do that. He just was the typical generation dad, that night and off to bed, you know, that kind of a thing. He loved Christmas. That was the one time I saw my father as a really, really amazing father, is that he got excited at Christmas and he'd wake us up at 3:30 in the morning. He couldn't stand it anymore, wanted us to come and open presents. So that was a good memory for him, for us. My mother died in 1991, I think it was, and my father lived on till he was 90 years old. He definitely lived a long life too, but she had emphysema. There's a lot to talk about my mom. You know, she, like I said, one of the best things I could say is her compassion for people. At their memorial, the place was packed and there was standing room out the door. And the priest, when he did her memorial, said to everybody that I would try to tell you about Rita Greeno, which was my mom, but there's no need for her testimony when you take a look at all the people that came. She mothered everybody that came in the house. She said, there's good in everybody, there's good in everybody, and she'd find it, and she'd make them know it. And when I'd have my sleepovers with the girls, they would have a big pajama party or whatever, she'd kiss every one of them goodnight, just like she did me, so they wouldn't feel left out, and gave them a hug. To raise children with special needs with nothing out there to help her, she could talk to them, and she didn't know sign language right away. She didn't learn it till much later, but she had her own way of communicating, and believe me, she did. She was amazing. I think my mother taught us unconditional love for everybody, and that you can not like what somebody does. That was her lesson, but you can still unconditionally love them. And so she really taught us to be that way with everybody, respectful. I dated, but my father was very strict, and so it would be more likely to all of us go to a certain place and then hang out together set for official dates, because then my father'd have to look them over. I just was busy at home taking care of things more than dating until probably junior and senior year. I met Steve Rust in my senior year, and he had already asked someone to the prom, so he couldn't ask me, but we started dating and dated another person too. I wasn't going steady or anything, and the other person was Steve Lord. And then after a couple weeks and everything, he asked me to go steady with him and stuff like that, and I told him that at the end of 2 weeks I'd decide, and so I did. I decided to go steady with him, and then so we went probably steady in that summer, and then engaged in August and married in November 20th. I think my mom was excited. My father didn't think we'd go through with it. He thought as kids we're probably just gonna, I don't know, maybe or maybe not, but they were excited for us. They were very good about it, and so was my mother. She was making sure that, the reception was just right in the church and everything. So she and my father, my father, when I showed him my engagement ring, he asked Steve Rust. He asked him, did he get it out of a bubblegum machine? It was my father's way of joking, but we laughed. And he came up one day and said, oh, by the way, I joined the Army, which I didn't know. Yes, he did. And so there we were, off in the Army. He never asked me if I wanted to leave him alone. It just was sort of like part of the conversation one day that he'd signed up for the Army and everything. We'd already knew I was engaged and we were going to get married. And so I was like, oh, okay. Venture. Everything was an adventure when you're 18 years old. We went to Georgia first, and Fort Benning, Georgia, and we were there for 3 years. And I had Kim. I was married in 71, and then in 72, Kim was born. And then from there, we ended up going to Germany, where Stevie was born, my son Stevie, in 75.
How did that feel being a first-time parent?
A little scary, being that far away from home. A little sad to miss the holidays and things that, for the parents not to see a grandchild. Those things were hard, very hard on them. Exciting and scary at the same time to be in Germany. It was very exciting because we were going to see something that, the world, But when we got there, it was a rude awakening because it was, we went twice and the second time was better. First time I wasn't aware of anything whether culture or anything. And when you first move from one base to another, I don't care what they give you for traveling expenses, it's never enough. So you have to get there, start out all over again, get a job, get daycare, to get whatever. It was pretty scary. But, and the other side of the story would be it was amazing to see all the things we got to see that other people would never get to see. That for me it was just overwhelming at first. We had a time when we were over there the second time, and the kids were a little bit older, or in grade school, but where it was during the hostage crisis, where there was a bomb put into our building where we were living, and it was like a 4-story building with 3 stairwells full of 4 stories of people, and they put a bomb in the laundry room where we had just been down there, and we were gone and to the store or whatever, and when we came back, everything was totally roped off, and the police were there, and they had to take the bomb out. Yeah, it was a time, but you know, when you're young, you take these things in stride. You truly do. I mean, you take all that in stride. I didn't sit there freaking out or whatever, took it in stride. I guess you get so accustomed to being a military wife. Sure, I wish he was home during the holidays, especially if he was gone, and I wished he could stay home. I mean, I certainly missed him when he was gone, but I made it nice for him when he came home. I always had his steak, and he liked his beer, and he liked to have just be home. The most fun it was the camping when we were all together on Pikes Peak. We used to love to go camping. And the other ones are when he went to the field, how I would do it so they wouldn't be so lonesome, or I wouldn't be so lonesome, as I'd make that our time. And I'd have the kids, I'd let them play out later. I'd sit outside with the other women. We'd all sit outside and watch them play on the playground. And we'd take them up and do the hot dogs and the macaroni. And then they could, you know, they were young enough where if they wanted to crawl into bed, they could. You know, I just tried to make it really special so they wouldn't miss Steve so much.
Do you feel like motherhood fits you?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Yeah. The funny thing is I wanted to be a nun. Till I was about 11 years old and met a boy. But no, for a long time I really thought I was going to be a nun. And you know, I stayed in Catholic school, felt most comfortable in Catholic schools, loved to be in church, loved to sing, and I always thought that was my life. But I think because my mother was such a good mother, and I saw how she was with the last born one, I was old enough to really see with Johnny and with Karen, and I saw her sit up many nights taking care of Johnny when he had asthma. And of course I sat up many nights with Stevie because he had seizures and stuff, and so I watched her and I thought, wow, that's the most beautiful thing I ever saw. Never complained or anything. She'd just sit up with him all night long, rubbing his back, trying to get him to breathe and giving him, you know, the vaporizers or whatever. So I thought, you know, that's pretty beautiful. So I decided that at that point I really wanted to be a mother. We would always take our vacations in upstate, always with the family, so that helped. Anytime we'd come, it was awesome. Dale and Irene would offer their home, everybody would come there, we'd all reconnect. It was like one big family reunion, and I loved it. And then again, when he got out of the military after 20 years, a couple years later, several years later, we decided to go home and live there for 10 years. And that's where all my brothers and sisters live. So I went home and I reconnected. I'd have them over. We'd all, you know, just real reconnection with all of them. The only thing is I missed out on my mom because she passed away before I could move back. So with my mother, it was every Sunday I would call and talk to her. And that was our thing when we got back into the States. Every Sunday she could count that I would call her and talk to her. My mom had just passed away when Kim told me she was pregnant. I felt immediately that was a gift from God because my mom had already told me before that usually when someone passes, a baby's born. So I always, in my head, I always thought that obviously Amber was the blessing. She was the one passing souls with my mother, and I always thought that Amber had a connection with my mother because of that, even though she didn't meet her. And she talked a lot about my mother as she was growing up, Amber did. And it was amazing that she would sympathize with me for not having a mom. Here she is, 4 years old, that baby, and 3 and 4. She drew me a picture one day when I was at church, and when I came back, it was Mother's Day, put a tape, it was of my mother, and she had gotten a picture of my mother and drew that picture, put it up over my bed, took my hand, took me, I swear to God, took me into the bedroom and said, I drew this for you, Nana, so you won't be so lonesome for your mom. That's what Amber did. She couldn't have been more than 3 or 4 years old. I decided after I got out, I retired from the Border Patrol and decided that now would be the time that we should move down here. We could afford to sell the house and move down here to be with the grandchildren and grandchildren so I could watch them grow up. So that's when we moved. Being a grandparent is the best. I mean, it just is, because you get a second chance to make up for your mistakes and to just pass on the love that you got when you were growing up to them, you know, and traditions and grandchildren. You're financially in a different place. You know, I did the best I could with the kids, but I made mistakes like anybody. You know, we didn't have the finances that we had with grandchildren. So it was kind of like a second chance to have fun and play like a kid, you know? And so, yeah, that's my greatest joy, along with my children, is my grandchildren. When we came out here to live out here, I have to say, with Ben, he was, oh man, he'd come over here and stay overnight, and it was my greatest joy. We'd sit here and he'd say he loved this window, because the moon, he could see the moon. And he would tell me that, and then we'd race around. We'd have races around here, just like when Michael was growing up. We'd race around here, race around. Man, these kids really wore me out. Yeah, but yeah, they were so much fun. So yeah, I really enjoyed and loved grandchildren. Yeah, it was fun. They give so much to you. I can say, I remember Michael standing on that table singing to us when he was no more than not even 3. So yeah, those are wonderful memories.
Did Steve get sick?
Oh, probably when we moved to Malone, he was already starting to. He had to give up his job in Colorado. He got in a. Not his fault, but he got in a track accident, a vehicle accident in the military. So he got the front of his head with a lot of scar tissue that went back there. So he passed out a lot when he wouldn't even know it. It was called sick sinus syndrome, and it's from fractures that you get up there. But anyways, so we knew something was wrong. So he had to quit his security job. Actually, he was a fire inspector. He had to quit it because he couldn't drive the truck anymore. So we moved to Malone, and that's when I knew he was having trouble breathing with the COPD and stuff like that, having those passing out spells. So that's when he probably really got sick, and that was in 1999. He was here with the kids for many years, and then he got worse and had several operations from lack of circulation and things like that. And so then he came home, stayed with us, and then we all went together for hospice, and he passed away pretty quickly when it was at that time. It was within a couple days. But I was grateful that he had that time with him. So it changed a lot after that. You focus more on the children and the grandchildren, and Ben and I were able to almost every day go to school together. That helped a lot, because if I'd go to pick them up from school, you know, that helped a lot to have someone to talk to. And then Kim and Ryan were real good. All of them stayed with me for a couple weeks after. My life was full. I had the kids, I had the grandchildren, I had everybody here. So I was grateful to be here. I had a friend, which I'm with now, Steve Lord. I had a friend from way when that I remembered and that we had dated, and I had heard his mom passed, and every time I go home, it brings back my mom's memories and everything, of course, here too, but especially being there. And I think I was visiting the graves, and I thought Steve's up there along with my mother, and I thought to myself, he must be feeling pretty sad, so I'll just stop by and tell him I'm sorry his mom passed. And then after I saw him, and after he walked me to the car, and I'll tell you what I tell everybody, that when right before I left, we hugged, and it was like, all of a sudden, it was like my heart did something that, where it just was like, oh, I do have room. He's it. It was a connection, a physical connection that felt spiritual, that almost I knew at that moment, and so did he after we talked. I knew at that moment that that was what God intended me to follow that path and to find him, and been together ever since.
Just another human being Oh, I don't wanna hurt.
Now, with Steve, him and I have so much time now to explore different things. He's been trying to get me back into playing the guitar, but we sing all the time. As a matter of fact, we like show tunes during the day, because if we hear something that sounds like a song, we finish it, but we both finish it. So because he's a music lover and an artist and a musician, and he's given me a second chance at things I never thought I'd get to do again. It's been fun. Just a new adventure that I think I was always meant to have. And that's something that I wish for everybody in their relationships, is to be kind and to be loved and to feel the love. I feel like I'm loved.
What was your favorite decade?
Wow, I'd have to say now. Not that it wasn't my favorite when I got married, not that it wasn't my favorite when I had children, not that it wasn't favorite when I had the grandchildren were born. But for now, I think now, because I have time now to really show them. And that's how it was with my mother. She made us feel like we could do anything. And that's how you've gotta remember, you can do anything. And especially it's with love, showing unconditional love, you gain so much, so much. Everything that happens to me is, I believe, the path of God, and I believe that it's my children, my grandchildren, it's Stephen, it's everything, my kitty. Everything that happens to me, I think as you get older, you realize it's all about love and following the right path.
So this is love. So this is love. So this is what makes life divine. I'm all aglow, and now I know the key to all heaven is mine. My heart has wings, and I can fly. I'll touch every star in the sky. So this is the miracle that I've been dreaming of. So this is love.